Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to the second panel discussion here this morning. On behalf of Obeikan Education, I'm very privileged to be chairing this session because we are a private sector partner in the process of education reform in a number of countries in the region. Our math and science curriculum is now firmly embedded in the systems in 3 or 4 countries. That is based on the McGraw-Hill series, of course, translated, adapted to local the culture and also adapted to the standards in various countries. Our creative curriculum is also being implemented for early childhood education, and with our partnership with Cambridge University Press, we also have localized versions of English language curriculum. And later this year we will be running 6 vocational colleges working with the Saudi government and our partner Laureate Education. And throughout this process we're constantly having to examine our curriculum, examine the relevance. Are we preparing students for the 21st century to be citizens in this region? Are we preparing them for employment? And of course, as we implement a curriculum which makes new demands, which in language, for example, involves a communicative methodology, or which involves individualized, differential learning, how are the teachers prepared? It's no use implementing a demanding new curriculum if the teachers don't have the skills, don't have the preparation to take full advantage of it. So these are the issues that we're constantly needing to address, and which our panel will be addressing as we go forward. Technology, we've heard a lot about technology this morning already, and we will over the next couple of days. Obeikan Education is at the forefront of bringing technology into the classroom, but also creating digital content which is engaging and interactive. But once again, the challenge really is not to make technology an end in itself, and to see beyond that, beyond the hype. In the end, technology should be a tool to improve teaching and learning. And are the teachers seeing technology as a threat or an opportunity? So the challenges which Obeikan faces as an actor, I hope are also some of the issues that as a panel we will be chewing over today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the members of the panel. We've already heard from Ms. Mahra Hilal Al-Mutaiwei, who is Director of the Regional Center for Educational Planning. Her Highness Sharifa Ghazi, Chief Executive of the Princess Alia Foundation and member of the Jordan Education Board. Welcome. His Excellency Mr. Haif Bannayan, Chief Executive of Queen Rania Teacher Academy. Dr. Jehad Zakarneh, Assistant Deputy Minister for Curricula, Palestine. Welcome. And Mr. Mohammad Al-Zoubi, who is Managing Director for Educational Training Center, Ministry of Education, Jordan. And last but not least by any means, Butler Battaglino, Senior Partner and Co-Head of the Education Practice at the Parthenon Group. If I could start with you, Sharifa, and a big question to start off with, and a quote from the Arab Human Development Report, and I quote: "The most worrying aspect is education's inability to provide the requirements for the development of Arab societies." True or false? But seriously, to what extent do you agree with this statement? And as far as it relates to curriculum and teaching quality in particular, what are your comments?
Thank you for putting me on the spot and starting off with a very, very big question. I don't think that you can actually assess that just in light of the Arabic world or the Arab world. I think education as a whole, when you look at it globally, we are in a crisis. I think that we are possibly failing the new generation. We are not able to understand necessarily how they are learning. We come up with these wonderful solutions. We come up with new technologies, new curriculum, but we don't stop and actually ask our client, how do you learn? I think that is a major factor that we are missing. Are we able to provide for the requirements of the developing world, not just the Arabic world? No, I don't think we are. We talk very much about quality of education. We talk about inquiry, we talk about critical thinking, problem-solving skills, cognitive development. Do we actually implement that within the classroom? I really don't think so. We still tend to teach to test, although a number of different systems around the world are moving away from that and trying to put more emphasis on report-based assessment, ongoing assessment. We are not necessarily doing it enough. There is a great deal of stress put on the teacher, where there's a curriculum packed full of wonderful information. Do we really need the children to know all of that? Possibly not.
So what I'm hearing is that maybe people on panels like this one are all saying the right things and asking the right questions, but the gap seems to be in implementation. Is that what you're saying?
I think that we need to cut a lot of the frills. I have a bit of a radical view on education, please forgive me. I think we need to focus more on actually allowing children to gain knowledge, to become active partners in knowledge acquisition, and then implementing that knowledge in all different areas of their lives.
And in practical terms, how does one, if that is the answer, what are the are there any steps that you can point to, or any other members of the panel, to engage with the learners, is what you're saying, make them maybe stakeholders in the whole process? I think
once you give them a sense of responsibility over their own learning, they will become much more active participants. We have wonderful resources out there that we are not necessarily using in the correct way. We complain about the fact that this new generation do not express correctly, yet we do not give them the tools or the ability to express within the classroom. Teaching should be an interactive process. Interactivity shouldn't just be restricted to a computer.
And is that maybe to do with the relationship between teachers, or the inequality, or the type of relationship between teachers, or the expectation of teachers as maybe people who are the fount of all knowledge and who are filling empty vessels? Is that part of what you're talking about?
I think so. I think that possibly we are still stuck in the situation where the teacher is talking about or talking to children about what they should be learning, rather than floating an idea and asking children to participate, asking children to talk about it. But at the same time, teachers are very, very stressed with the amount they have to complete within the curriculum. So do we give them enough freedom to be able to do that? Do we empower teachers enough through training, through time with the students in the classroom? Do we give them the skills they need? Do we empower them to find their own methods of teaching within the classroom? I think that is, in essence, what we do need to do. We need to trust the teachers a great deal more, but also provide them with real tools and skills to be able to impart knowledge on their clients, which are the children.
Thank you very much, Sharifa. More impassioned defense of the teacher's role and the possibilities of empowering empowering teachers for education development. But just to return maybe to the curriculum question, Dr. Jehad, in conversation with you yesterday, you expressed the view that that too often the textbook is the curriculum and the curriculum is the textbook. And you felt that sometimes teachers and pupils were slaves to this. Could you expand a little bit on that view? Tell us a little bit about the causes and maybe some of the solutions to the situation.
Okay, Mr. David, thank you very much. And excuse me, I feel I prefer to talk in Arabic. I feel it's easier for me.
Always there are misconceptions of implementing curriculum, especially in a very central system of education. And we're talking about a textbook. The textbook, it summarizes the whole curricula or the idea of curricula. And they're talking about the exams. Sometimes the exams, it's cut it short. And the educational system is linked to this textbook method. In fact, when we look at the objective of the curriculum, it has so many components. One of these components, philosophy, objectives, content, which form that textbook, and the activities, and all of these standards are linked to the teacher. Whether the teacher, he can be able to enrich these components, or his role is going to be the opposite totally. He will attempt, during the time is available to him, he will attempt as much as he can if he has limited time. So he's limited, or he wants to finish a certain size of delivering information during this time. So evaluation and assessment, it will be limited to the textbook. So the objectives of this curricula, he has to create balance between delivering the knowledge and creating the personality, and these methods are not involved in the process of testing or examining. So now we're talking about whether the student is he perfecting this, applying this information or not. So the curricula should launch from different aspects. The first one, this curricula it's linked with the skills of the 21st century. The skills of the 21st centuries. We're talking about the ongoing technology and the renewable technology. So this has to be keeping up with every 5 years at least. Therefore, the curricula should take in consideration to be more flexible with this technology. And since we're looking at the individual differences and issues that has to do with living for life, learning for life. Now, the curricula should be designed and should go along and harmonize with the self-learning method at the same time. So,
and you've mentioned, I'm sorry to interrupt, yes. You've mentioned you mentioned the negative or the potentially negative impact of examinations, of assessment on what is going on, and that's been mentioned by one or two other speakers before. And I'd like to maybe throw the question to Tammy here. I'll start with a little anecdote. I once, in another country outside this region, I knew somebody who was able to demonstrate, and it was his PhD thesis, that the final examination caused unlearning. He was able to show that students reached a certain level of competence until they started being taught for the examination, and then their competence actually went down in the last couple of years of school. So a very striking example. But in education, we need measurement. We can't do without measurement. So what is the solution to this conundrum, Tammy?
Sure.
assessment, oftentimes, measurement is needed, and oftentimes across systems, assessment is linked to being punitive or compliance-driven and more of a summative type assessment. What we see in high-performing countries around the globe is not just one layer of end-of-course or end-of-year assessments for students, but more point-in-time, more seamless information flows around student and teacher performance. Many times these are referred to as formative assessments. They're a critical piece oftentimes, and to the comments earlier, curriculum alone is really just the what needs to be taught. But when you have embedded assessment and formative assessment, it helps to inform the how and when, and how to get the right information to the students in the right formats at the right time. And so assessment in a more consistent way, in a more fluid way, again referred to as formative assessments, helps provide information back to the teachers and the students and the administrators so that they know where the students are, where the gaps are, where there are areas for development and focus, how to get the right content to them, and also how to inform the professional development and supports for teachers so that they can be more effective in the classroom.
Thank you. So the status of formative assessment in the region, maybe I could turn to Mr. Haif at this stage. Are our teachers prepared? Are they, because this, like a new curriculum, new forms of assessment and adapting one's teaching in the light of the results of formative assessment puts demands on teachers. Are our teachers prepared for the kind of approach that Tammy has been advocating?
It's an easy answer and a very difficult one as well, because the straightforward answer is no. I don't believe that our teachers are well trained, and take it from university level and going into the education sector. They're not prepared. If you look at programs around in the Arab world, and I'm not that big of an expert all over the region, but you don't see very strong pre-service training, preparation for teachers, and you certainly don't see a comprehensive approach to preparing the teacher for the classroom. And in many cases, I think we expect too much from the teacher without really actually giving the teacher enough of the support. And I think in designing reform programs, I mean, reform has been going on in the region for many years, and it's always been the priority. Education has always been the priority agenda through many years. But I think in deciding what are the priorities, we do not give the teachers enough of the priorities, and we have this. Sometimes we look for the quick win and the ready-made programs. And I think teachers deserve more, deserve programs that are, first of all, give them enough time to absorb. We tell them to teach the children to focus on educational outcomes, but when we train them, we do not focus on educational outcomes. Teachers need to have the time to absorb what they are learning. Number two, teachers need to have, it has to be relevant. That's why, for example, at the Queen Rania Teacher Academy, we train the math teachers on how to teach math. We train the science teachers on how to teach science, because I think relevance is critical for the teachers. They need to grasp a piece of information and know exactly how to use it in the classroom, especially in classes or in schools that are in many cases underprivileged. Also, we tell them that teach the children using multifaceted approach to teaching and learning. I think they deserve the same from us. I think they need to be offered this type of training in a multiple approach. So part of it could be participatory approach, part of it through project-based learning, classroom observations, and definitely when, if we are expecting a change, we need to allow them time to do that change. Establish relevance, as I said, and they need to have enough support from the leadership, from the school, instructional leadership from the school that would support them implement those new pedagogies and approaches. Now, I cannot deny, I'm not an expert on curriculum, but I cannot deny that the curriculum should not be so rigid, and it needs to allow room for the teacher to really focus on the educational outcomes and the learning of the students.
Thank you. You've referred there to pre-service programs. I think you also referred to support in the workplace. What is, and we hear about teacher training, teacher education, professional development. I mean, what is the if you like, the ideal regime, given the importance that all the panelists so far have been laying on the competences of the teacher? What is the ideal regime of preparation and then ongoing training or professional development to achieve the reform objectives?
Well, first of all, you may have great mathematicians or scientists, but that does not make them teachers. So I think we should get out of the framework that universities graduate good scientists or good mathematicians. We need to prepare the teachers of how to teach, because this is a completely different ball game altogether. It's how to deliver the information, how to capture the students' attention, how to tackle the multiple learning approaches that the student needs in order for them to grasp this piece of information. So I think pre-service training is very important. However, that does not negate the fact that in-service training remains also an important thing. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, to us, it has to be a multifaceted approach. It has to be piecemeal, where you allow the teacher enough time to absorb, enough time to practice what we are actually teaching them, and enough time where they get supported in the classroom, be it from the trainer. We do a lot of, for example, at the Queen Rania Teacher Academy, all our training is in the school, in their environment, so that we do not bring them theory. Theory is very important, but we have to establish the relevance. We teach in their environment, and we tell them that these things that we are preaching are actually a possibility. And one thing that I have not mentioned, I think we also need to raise the level of accountability at the teacher level and at the principal level. If you want to become a teacher, I mean, when you're a parent, you worry about the impact you have on your children when you raise them. If you're a teacher, you have an impact on hundreds and maybe thousands of students. And I think if every teacher really raised that alarm and that flag in their head, they would realize, should I stay in this profession or not? And I think this is a very important thing. Accountability is key for teachers.
Turning to Mr. Mohammad now, and maybe a question back related to the curriculum. This region has reportedly youth unemployment rates of 25% or more in some countries, some of the highest in the world. Now, there are many reasons for that. We're not going to lay the blame all at the doorstep of education. But insofar as education has a role, is one of the causes, or insofar as it is part of the solution, what are your thoughts on this?
Thank you very much indeed, actually. Sure, the education sector, or the education in general, is the most or the crucial element in developing other sectors, actually. So any nation which focuses on education as the basic element of development in other sectors definitely will succeed in achieving its goals. Now, regarding curriculum or regarding education in general, I would say that when we start putting plans for reform of education, we should have actually a comprehensive picture to tackle all the pillars of education and all the components that form the education sector. Now, when we come to a school, for instance, once we think of reforming education in school, we should look deeply on curriculum or curricula, teacher, learning environment, as well as resources, different resources needed. Now, we should work, you see, simultaneously with these all elements. If we develop the best curriculum in the world, and we don't have a well-trained teacher, we don't have professional development programs or training courses for the teachers, and we don't have enough resources to help teachers you see, achieve their goals, we don't have the learning environment needed, definitely we would really face challenges and problems that we can't really overcome.
But specifically in terms of curriculum, I mean, it is a common complaint that the education system does not prepare people for successful employment. And is maybe is it because it's not actually seen in that role? But if that is the case, which particular aspects of the curriculum do you believe are deficient in that respect?
You see, the world is rapidly changing, and this means that the curriculum should follow what's taking place all over the world. We should continuously develop our curricula so as to meet the requirements of the world. Now, definitely it has a very great impact on the graduates by the end of the day, and also the extent of meeting the requirements of the labor market. Now, when we talk about curricula, we should, you see, develop that curricula in accordance with our needs in the market, and so as to turn out people who are able to find work in the market by the end of the day.
Thank you. Sharifa, have you got anything to say about the suitability of the current education system in terms of preparing people for the labor market?
Should you link it directly and purely with the labor market? What are we trying to accomplish? Are we actually trying to educate the future generation to lead us into a much better future? Or are we still pinholing the system of education to say, okay, the labor market needs this, therefore we readapt our curriculum to suit what is the need today? Well, there has to be a balance here. Surely you have to be able to arm your children with the skills they need to adapt in any market. It's not necessarily the labor market in Jordan or in Europe or anywhere else. It is, what are we as educators trying to achieve through education? And not only that, using it in the correct way, allowing these children to actually learn and create something new. Today we talk only about, I think that the two largest or biggest buzzwords after education are innovation and creativity. Mm-hmm. And those are directly linked with education. However, if we look at our educational systems across the world, we do not ever allow for children to be innovative or creative. So what actually are we trying to achieve?
Yes, Mr. Haif.
This question really motivated me to speak, and I do agree with Sarra. And I think we are trying to have our learners or our graduates ever evolving and ever learning, because this is how the world is turning. Yet we're trying to tackle that. Instead of focusing on the educational outcomes, we're trying to focus on the education system. And we go back and we put a frame around it, and we put it in a very structured and somehow rigid manner. And I think it needs to be a little bit more flexible and a little bit more collective. For example, where is industry? I think industry is very important. They have to have a say for example, in higher education, industry have to have a say in the quality of the graduates, and what are the current markets that are jobs that are needed. For example, you talk to the IT sector, and they're desperate for qualified people, and they interview hundreds, but they're not getting the skill set that they want, and they end up having to retrain them. So I think it's a collective approach, and if we're talking education for employment, bring the employers on the table and let them have a say in it.
That brings me to the next question, Mahra. And Mr. Haif, there's been reference to a centralized system. There's been reference, I think, to the difficulty in implementing change within a large bureaucratic system. And one of the suggestions that's been made, I believe, by the Royal Commission in Jordan is to set up a separate body which would be responsible for education reform separately from the ministry. We'll take a pause there. Your Majesty, welcome. Thank you very much for taking time to join us for this session. It's an honor. We've been talking about the difficulties of the appropriacy of, in the areas of curriculum and teacher training, the centrality of the teacher, the importance of preparing teachers adequately, and the difficult demands often that are made on teachers. We've also talked about an appropriate curriculum, preparing people not just for the employment market, but to be active citizens and actors in the development of the nation and in nation building. And we were coming on to the practical implementation issues, and it's just been suggested that really there are other stakeholders outside the monolithic system itself, and that potentially, if we're talking about employment, preparing people for employment involving employers as well. Also, it has been suggested, and it's been implemented in 1 or 2 countries, the idea of setting up a separate body outside the ministry, a body which would be responsible for education reform, particularly in the areas of curriculum and teacher development, which presumably would have the advantages of dedicated resources, not tied down with or no barriers in terms of inertia or resistance within the system. In the Gulf, in 1 or 2 countries, is the Tatweer organization in Saudi Arabia, education councils in 1 or 2 other Gulf countries. So I was going to ask Ms. Mahra what her views were on this, and whether this might be a solution, creating a separate agent for change, if you like.
Dear David,
talking about separating the educational process with the Minister of Education and the Arab world. Since 20 years, we're talking about developing and enhancing education. We're talking about what does development mean? It has to be created and implemented, and there must be an assessment for these plans. If we look at plans on the papers, we're talking about a lot of outputs and incomes, and they can be achieved, that we could be able to achieve 10 years from now. But the actual crisis, implementing the actual measurements for these plans, is the competencies of these measurements. Establishing separate bodies aside from the Minister of Education in the process of implementation, it will take away a lot of roles of these governmental entities. We have to measure the competencies of these plans, but also they need another establishment or institutions to support it away from the Minister of Education, so there can be a transparency and honesty to measure the progress and the steps of the Ministry of Education. Therefore, we can be able to say if these steps are successful or not. That's what we need in the Ministry of Education. We are an evaluating establishment or institution, and it's a little bit away from the Ministry of Education to measure the outcomes of education and to put the role of development. And I think Ministry of Education will be more successful this way. So now we're talking about the accountability and development now.
Thank you. There is, of course, I mean, if we're trying to institutionalize change within a system, how much sense does it make to take the change agent outside? Ultimately, for change to be sustainable, it needs to be within the system, doesn't it? But I certainly agree with you that that the monitoring, the evaluation, these sorts of activities, and holding people to account, as Haif's saying, there's certainly a role for doing that outside the institution itself. I've got one more question, but it's a question for every member of the panel, if you don't mind. I'd like you to imagine that. Yes, Mr. Haif, thank you very much. Haif has an important appointment elsewhere. Thank you very much for your contributions. So I was asking you to imagine yourselves in an all-powerful position with responsible regionally for education reform in curriculum and teacher development. You also have the power and the resources at your disposal. So what single action would you take, briefly, which would have the biggest impact in your role? And I'd like to take you back to the Human Development Report finding at the beginning that education currently is reportedly unable to provide for the development of Arab societies. So what single action would you take, if you could, to fix that? Tammy.
Sure. We've talked a lot today around the teacher and the instructional core. I feel the one theme that we didn't touch upon, which would be a critical focus, is in addition to the professional development, would be thinking through the pre-service and the selection, the incentives and policies that are put in place to attract the highest caliber talent into the teaching profession. Really understanding in many of the leading systems around the world, you'll see that the highest performing students, whether it's out of high school or out of institutions of higher education, are those who seek opportunities to go into education. That they're skilled and they have many options, but the top 5 or the top 30% of high school or higher education performing students will opt into education. And I think as the region looks to the future, really stepping back and in conjunction with thinking about the supports for teachers, really trying to understand what are the incentives and the policies that can be put into place to ensure that the consideration set around becoming a teacher is highly attractive, and that there are the right incentives and supports in place, that it's a valued profession and one where the supports will be there, that people will stay and be able to be retained.
Thank you. So it's looking at the pipeline into the system in the first place. Mr. Mohammad.
Yeah. Actually, I think the idea of having separate bodies, you see, other than the ministries, for curricula and for education, teachers' education, as well as examinations. And this is probably a very good idea that might help us overcome the centralized system that we have in our countries. And we have already started that actually in Jordan. We have a training center, which is just at the very beginning of its establishment, and hopefully it will move forward in cooperation with the private sector as well as the national institutions in Jordan. And I always think that we don't have a problem in finance, in funding our work in the Ministry of Education. The Arab world is rich enough to develop its educational system and be leading that system all over.
Thank you. And you, as the person in charge, have all the funds you need, as I said.
Yes.
But yes, creating the change agent. Thank you, Dr. Jehad.
Thank you very much.
I believe that, in my point of view, that there are two main cases that should be taken into consideration. The first one that needs the administrative system that is being built on the centralized systems, and which make the change very slow since it is connected to a very long chain of schools. The other point is that going out of the centralized system is helping in this century, since we are talking about the methods that are not very helping in the Arab world right now, because we are talking about the methods that are available in the formal institution. The other point that I would like to raise is what is connected to this system is the paths, the educational paths. In my point of view, we are suffering from the issue that the secondary educational system, it is connected to the academic path that is connected to two paths, and we should have variety in the paths because it should be connected with the non-centralized systems. It should be connected with the environment that is surrounding the school, away from the limited paths that are being limited by the ministry.
Thank you very much. So it's about devolving responsibility, revolving decision-making, and presumably devolving budgeting decisions down the line. Sharifa.
Are you sure? I think we need to make education a lot more relevant. We can teach about the world wars, for example. Many students will say, why do we need to learn about it today? Bring it, make it relevant to their lives today. That way they take more responsibility. They will understand a lot better. Empower the teachers. Give them the opportunity to be able to look for extra resources, to be able to teach in the way that they know how. They are the ones who know their students. They're the ones that interact with them. Trust them enough to be able to give them that knowledge. Create a very positive partnership between the teacher, the parent, and the student, because that's what it's about. And mainly, really give the children a voice. They're the ones this is all about. That's why we're here. We are educating them. They need a voice. We need to listen to them to develop the correct educational strategies. How do we teach? How do they learn? And not come up with things on our own. They need to be a lot more active in education and the development of education.
So engaging the children, where we started at the beginning of this panel discussion, and also connecting them, I think, connecting them with what is expected of them in life, and bringing in the other stakeholders there, the teachers, empowering them, and the parents that we haven't actually mentioned yet in this panel discussion, but a crucial part of that triangle. Thank you. Mahra.
In addition to what was mentioned by Sharifa, Sarra, the involvement of the children, right now we have sessions for children of 6 and 7 years old. After different years, they are going to live in a variable world. We might have some development decisions that are being taken according to the facts that we have right now, but maybe years ahead from now, they may suffer from the injustice that we have made regarding not coping with the change that is happening. We should plan for the future. We should give them skills in order to come up with the educational system with the new outcomes. Today, what is considered to be a fact might be something a mistake in the future, might be something error in the future. We should give them the ability or the skills in order to be creative thinking, the critic thinking, how to solve problems, how to adapt different environments and to adapt different variables, to be able to make the decisions and to be able to analyze the information and to make their opinion according to that analysis. So all of these aspects, we should depend on them in building our curricula. but also we should take into consideration that there should be some constants and something that we should build on them, because the student need all of the things that might be beneficiary for them and that might be useful for them right now and in the future. We cannot give them temporal solutions because there are so many variables in the future, and we should give them constant skills that they can deal with in the future.
Thank you. So nobody can tell the future, so the best we can do is plan now and give people life skills, I suppose, the ability to deal with the future, the ability to develop and actually to be part, as I said earlier, of nation, to be nation-building citizens. That's all we have time for. Thank you it all remains for me to thank our panel very much for your contributions. Thank you very much, and also to you for being such a good audience. Thank you very much.